to wrestle with some really big, complex ideas and hopefully leave you feeling, well, sharper and more clued into some cutting-edge thinking.
And today's topic is definitely out there. It's pretty radical, actually.
It really is. We're diving deep into this linguistic framework that basically says our modern languages, the ones we use constantly, might actually be limiting our intelligence.
Yeah, the source material talks about a crisis of linear reductionism. You
Yeah.
know, how languages like English are great for speed, for data, but maybe they strip away context. The embodied stuff, the relational connections, even the sacred.
Leaving us overloaded with info, but maybe not. Deeper in understanding.
Exactly. Information overload without the cognitive framework to really handle it wisely.
So the proposal isn't just tinkering with English, it's something much bolder. We're talking about the double transversal transjective quadratic model. That's a mouthful,
Let's call it Delta T22. Makes it a bit easier.
right? Delta T222. And it argues that, amazingly, the blueprint for a future superintelligence might be hiding in the structures of some of the world's oldest, what it calls covenantal languages.
It's a huge claim. The core project is to synthesize 6 specific linguistic systems from Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea, okay.
Okay.
And build what?
A single theoretically high IQ language. They call it the Sovereign Proto-Transjective Language, or KPTL for short, Kenamogorian Proto-Transjective Language.
Kanamagorian, got it. So our mission today is to really unpack this dense theoretical work, especially this ambition to engineer a language that, by its very structure, promotes truth, better relationships, and, well, smarter thinking.
It's ambitious linguistic engineering, no doubt about it.
And you mentioned a key concept early on, language not as code, but as a covenantal topology. That sounds profound. What does that actually mean?
It's a fundamental shift. Instead of seeing words as just labels for reality, Delta T22 sees the act of speaking, the utterance itself, as actively shaping reality. Ontology, what is, and utterance, what's said, are tangled up, mutually creating each other.
So language builds the world as much as it describes it.
In this view, yes, it's about engineering language for intelligence amplification, literally trying to build a better mind by building a better grammar.
Okay, let's dig into the foundation,
Yeah.
this Delta T22 framework. You said it rejects language hierarchies, no primitive versus advanced.
Correct. It insists that 4 core dimensions of human experience have to operate all at once, interwoven. They call it quadratic intersectionality.
Quadratic intersectionality.
Yeah.
Why is that move away from the idea of language evolving linearly, like tribe to global language? Why is shifting to transversal modulation so important here?
Well, the linear view often implies progress towards abstraction and maybe efficiency, right? But that efficiency can come at the cost of depth, of context.
Like stripping things down too much.
Exactly. Transversal modulation, on the other hand, is about increasing cognitive density without losing that richness. It's like creating a complex field where every single utterance has to sort of check in with these 4 fundamental pillars of consciousness.
Okay, so every sound, every phone isn't just a sound.
Yeah.
It's doing more work.
It becomes a microvector, carrying meaning across these 4 dimensions simultaneously. It's weaving together different kinds of intelligence in every syllable.
That makes sense, like a multi-layered security check for meaning. So what are these 4 axes? Let's start with the vertical one. Ultra, faith origin, what does that involve?
This is the connection to the sacred, to origin stories, ancestry, deep foundational myths. Linguistically, it's about how certain root sounds or words aren't arbitrary, but hold a kind of sacred resonance or reflect core cultural truths.
So the language itself keeps you tethered to that deeper meaning.
That's the idea. It ensures the language maintains a kind of spiritual integrity, connecting the present moment back to ancestral wisdom, even the cosmos.
Then we have the horizontal plane, extra, relation community. This sounds more familiar maybe. Social interactions.
Right, this is all about social reality, kinship, reciprocity, how we navigate relationships and community agreements. In grammar, you see this in things like politeness levels, complex kin terms, and really crucially for KPTL, grammatical markers that force you to constantly track relationships.
Force you how?
We'll get into specifics later, but imagine grammar that makes it impossible to talk about an action without also specifying how the actors relate to each other. It builds in relational attention.
Okay, interesting. Then moving inward, the meta reflection abstraction axis.
This is the mind looking at itself, thinking about thinking. It's about recursion nesting ideas within ideas, self-reference, abstract logic, and the ability to talk about language.
Metalinguistics.
Exactly. Modulating this axis means the language can handle complex, technical, or philosophical thought efficiently, which is key for that intelligence amplification goal.
And the final axis grounds everything. Intra, intimacy, somatic, the body.
Yes. Embodied knowledge. The wisdom in your hands, your breath, your gut feelings. Think about languages rich in sound symbolism, ideophones, or where language is deeply tied to gesture, craft, the physical world.
So KPTL isn't just something you think, it's something you feel and do.
That's fundamental. It's designed to be learned and lived through the body.
So if you force all four axes, ultra, extra, meta, intra, to work together in every utterance, the goal is Kennemagorian cognitive compaction, QCC. Compaction sounds like squeezing more meaning into less space.
Precisely. It's about boosting intelligence, not by just adding more words, like English often does, but through smarter grammar, specifically through grammatical recursion.
So getting more cognitive bang for your buck per syllable.
You got it. Instead of a long, rambling sentence explaining your reasoning and source of knowledge, a QCC-enabled KPTL utterance could pack all that, the logic, the relationships, the evidence into the very structure of the verb. Much denser, much more precise.
That's what you meant by distributed high IQ orality, making the language itself do the heavy lifting.
Yes, distributing the cognitive load into the shared grammatical structure.
Okay, that's the theory. But where did the building blocks come from? You mentioned 6 linguistic systems from Papua New Guinea. Why PNG?
Because of its incredible linguistic diversity. The Delta T22 framework argues that within this diversity, specific languages have already perfected structures that align with these 4 axes. They contain these innate high IQ features that have been largely ignored by mainstream linguistics.
So it's not about imposing something new, but about modulating existing strengths.
Exactly. Modulation, not replacement. Each chosen language is seen as a master of one axis, and KPTL aims to weave these masteries together. The genius is already there in these Papuan languages.
Let's look at the first source. Kate and Nimburan from the Madang Morobe region. They represent the meta-axis, the power of recursion. You said extraordinary morphosyntactic recursion. What does that actually mean for someone used to English?
Okay, Kate and Nimburan function as the metatransjective reflector in this model. Kate, for instance, is what linguists call an agglutinative language. It means you can stick lots of meaningful little bits, morphemes, onto a single verb root.
Like building a complex Lego structure out of one core brick.
Kind of, yeah. Take a sentence like, he quickly tied the rope because the elder told him the canoe would probably sink. In English, that's several clauses, separate verbs.
Right.
In Kate, much of that, the causation because the source of information told him, the probability, probably at the time, the action itself could potentially be packed into the structure of a single complex verb.
Wow. So it's not just nesting clauses like Russian dolls. It's more like integrated circuitry within the verb itself.
That's a great analogy. It enables what the source calls computational deep stack operations in everyday speech. It requires the listener and speaker to hold multiple layers of meaning in mind as the verb unfolds.
That sounds cognitively demanding.
It is. It trains what they call syntactic anticipation. And Kate also apparently forces the speaker to navigate layers of certainty, what the source terms faith claims, essentially embedding the evidential source right into that complex structure. It gives you the architecture for incredible conceptual density.
And Nimburan adds another layer, this idea of biomimetics and terrain echoes, language mimicking nature.
Yes, Nimburan seems to operate where the physical environment shapes speech more directly. The language becomes a kind of somatic practice where sounds echo ecological processes.
Like how?
Well, maybe the verb for water flowing uses liquid sounds, or a word for plant growing has a phonetic shape that mimics, I don't know, cracking earth or unfolding leaves. It's biomimetic. The intelligence of the language stays attuned to the intelligence of the surrounding natural world.
Okay, moving to the highlands. Enga. This is the source for the extra axis, the social logic. The key here is the switch reference system. You mentioned it earlier. Explain how that works.
Right. Enga acts as the extra transjective relator. Switch reference is basically a grammatical requirement. When you link 2 clauses, say, he went to the garden and she harvested yams, Enga forces you to put a little marker on the verb in the first clause. Went.
A marker that does what?
It explicitly signals whether the subject of the next clause, she harvested, is the same as the first subject, he went, or different. SS for same subject, DS for different subject.
And you have to do this.
You have to. It's not optional. So you are grammatically forced into continuous relational vigilance. You can't just narrate events. You have to constantly track and state who is doing what in relation to whom across the discourse.
So the grammar itself is mapping the social network of the story.
Precisely. Delta T22 calls this relational algorithmic grammar, RG. It sees it as a syntax that basically formalizes empathy, or at least relational awareness. It prevents what they call egoic closure. You can't just focus on your own actions grammatically
You're forced to acknowledge the other.
every step of the way. The Enga grammar, as the source puts it, covenant weaves the speaker into this web of distributed agency. Syntax becomes an ethical tool.
That is quite something. Imagine negotiations or conflict resolution in a language like that. Empathy is literally built into the sentence structure.
It's a powerful idea, and KPTL aims to integrate this mechanism to ensure users are always aware of the relational field their words are operating in.
Let's talk about the forelanguage, representing the intra-axis embodied knowing or evidential consciousness. This sounds like it's about truthfulness.
It's definitely about clarity of knowledge. 4 is famous for its evidential system, sometimes described as having up to 9 distinct categories. Essentially, you cannot just state a fact like, it is raining.
What do you have to do?
You have to grammatically mark how you know it's raining. Did you see it directly? Visual evidence. Did you hear the rain? Auditory evidence. Did you just come inside and you're wet? Inferential evidence. Did someone reliable tell you? Reported evidence.
Wow. So every single statement carries its own little footnote about the source of the information.
Exactly. It forces constant metacognition. The grammar itself demands you reflect on how you know what you claim to know.
This is what they call evidential epistemic transparency, EET.
That's the term. It turns grammar into this ongoing audit of consciousness. And the claim is it makes lying difficult, or at least grammatically costly.
How costly?
Mhm.
Can't you just lie about the evidence marker too? Say you saw when you only heard it?
You could try, but the system apparently creates a kind of dissonance. If you use the direct visual marker for something you merely inferred, you're not just stating a falsehood about the rain, you're misrepresenting your sensory relationship to reality in the grammar.
Okay.
In the Delta T22 model, this grammatical mismatch, this epistemic fingerprint not matching the claim, would make the utterance unstable. It couldn't be reliably used for the complex recursive operations we talked about with cake.
So the lie breaks the machine, in a way.
That's the idea. The structure demands integrity for optimal function. Truthfulness becomes computationally efficient.
All right, shifting back to the ultra-axis, the sacred dimension. We look at ableum and languages from the Sepik region. This connects language to visual art and geometry.
Yes. This component is the ultra-transjective aestheticor. Ableum culture is known for its incredibly intricate ceremonial art, especially the painted facades of their spirit houses, the house tamboran.
Okay.
The insight here is that the structure of the Ableum language, its sound patterns, its syntax, maybe even its tones, seems to mirror the geometric patterns and symmetries found in their sacred art. It's like the language and the art are two expressions of the same underlying epistemic geometry.
Can you give an example? How does sound mirror a visual pattern?
Well, maybe the way morphemes are ordered, or the rise and fall of tone in certain phrases, echoes the spiral pattern or the specific symmetries used in carvings related to creation myths. They call this morphophonemic covenant geometry, MCG.
So the sound itself becomes symbolic, an icon.
Exactly. Sound becomes icon and covenant. The phonology isn't just arbitrary sounds, it's a cosmogram. It encodes the sacred structure of the world, ensuring the language stays connected to that deep ultra-axis of meaning and reverence.
Okay, we have these incredibly sophisticated pieces: Kate recursion, Enga relationality, for evidence, Ableum geometry. But these are complex, specific systems. How do you actually stitch them together into something usable? That's where TikTok piecing comes in.
Right. TikTok Pisan, the well-known Creole language of PNG, acts as the quadratic fulcrum or the transjective medium. It's fascinating because it arose from often brutal colonial contact, mixing Austronesian, Papuan, German, and English elements.
But it developed its own stability.
Absolutely. It achieved its own sovereign grammar and incredible adaptability. Delta T222 sees it as a living Creole attractor, LCA. It can absorb elements from other languages while maintaining its own core intelligibility and, crucially, its relational function.
So it's like the user-friendly interface for all this underlying complexity.
That's a good way to put it. It provides the accessible performative framework. You get the deep cognitive power from the Cater force structures, but TikTok Peasant provides the flexible, chantable, readily learnable skeleton that holds it all together.
Making it a practical field lingua for collaboration, not just a theoretical construct.
Precisely. It allows the system to oscillate between, say, the deep compaction of Kate for planning and the immediate relational clarity needed for group work, using a relatively simple functional grammar as the bridge.
So now we get to the how. How do you actually build KPTL?
Hmm.
The sources stress this isn't some academic exercise imposed from outside. It involves covenantal co-design, CCC.
Yes, that's critical. It means working directly and iteratively with P&G elders, linguists, local experts, young people. The design process itself has to embody the relational principles of the language it's trying to build.
Okay, and this co-design guides a specific algorithm,
Right.
a 5-phase process.
Right, a 5-phase transjective algorithm. It's the engine for actually synthesizing these different linguistic strengths.
Phase 1 is etymoverbal inventory, starting with verbs.
Yes, focusing on core action words like to weave, to think, to see, to connect. They collect these from the source languages, but crucially they record not just the meaning but the sound, ultra, in the embodied context, intra. How does it feel to perform that action? What cultural weight does it carry?
Then phase 2 sounds like where the real magic happens, transjective morphology, encoding the delta T22 axes into the words themselves.
This is the core engineering step. They design morphological rules for building words that require key terms to operate on at least 2 axes at once. They call it duosens.
Can you give an example of duosens in action?
Imagine creating a grammatical affix, a little tag you add to a verb. The single affix might simultaneously signal both a material action, like building a house, and a relational aspect, like building it for the community according to agreed principles. You can't just say build, you have to say something like build relationally correctly.
So the 4 evidentials and ENGA relational markers get fused right into the word structure.
That's the goal, to make that multi-axis awareness mandatory at the morphological level. A single KPTL verb for, say, understanding might inherently encode understanding recursively, meta, based on direct experience intra, within a shared framework, extra, that honors origins, ultra.
One word packs all that in. That's the cognitive compaction.
That's QCC in action, drastically reducing ambiguity by building the context into the word itself.
Okay, phase 3, recursive syntax design, bringing back the Kate deep structures.
Right, but now integrating them with the other axes. The goal is a multi-conscious language. Using Kate-Bourne recursion combined with ENGA-style subject tracking, they aim for sentences that can elegantly hold multiple perspectives simultaneously: the speakers, the listeners, maybe even an ancestral or community perspective.
Ideal for complex planning or conflict resolution, where you need to see things from multiple angles.
Exactly. Maximizing IQ through syntax, designing the grammar for advanced multivariable problem solving.
Phase 4 is evidential empathic calibration. This sounds like the quality control step.
It is. It's about hard-coding the 4 evidential system and the ENGA switch reference rules into the core grammar, making sure every utterance is forced to be self-aware about its knowledge source and socially coherent in tracking relationships.
Building that linguistic covenantal integrity from the ground up.
Precisely. Reducing the potential for sloppy thinking or deliberate manipulation that can plague less structured communication.
And finally, phase 5, the performative orality cycle. This isn't about textbooks.
No, absolutely not. The language is designed for oral transmission through chant, gesture, shared work, ritual. This ensures somatic linguistic consciousness, SLC. The intelligence isn't just abstract, it's lived, breathed, felt, and performed by the community.
That leads perfectly into how KPTL is actually learned. You're saying it's learned by doing gardening, carving, building, not sitting in a classroom. How does that work? How do you teach grammar through gardening?
It operates within what the source calls the oral resonance field. Competence isn't measured by memorizing rules, but by how well your rhythm, your breath, your chant syncs up with the collective activity. Learning happens through kinesthetic etymogenesis.
Kinesthetic etymogenesis,
Yeah.
meaning understanding arises from moving and speaking at the same time.
Yes. You understand the word for weave by actually weaving while chanting the word, feeling the rhythm in your hands match the rhythm of the sound. Syntax isn't abstract rules, it's imprinted through covenantal microgesture.
Microgestures, like tiny hand movements.
Subtle movements, maybe how you hold a tool, the tension in your body as you speak these become tactile signatures that bind the meaning semantics to the action praxis. It's about creating covenantal neuroplasticity.
Rewiring the brain through ritualized multisensory activity.
That's the theory. Creating high-density thinking without needing literacy as the primary mediator.
The sources mention specific teaching methods. Tonal axis training,
Yeah, these sound fascinating. Tonal axis training might involve learners physically tracing the pitch contours of sacred ultra-axis sounds with arm movements, linking sound, space, and meaning. Reciprocal echo could be mirroring exercises where learners swap roles and utterances to immediately feel the Angus-style relational dynamics.
And for the complex recursion.
Reflective looping. Maybe chanting the recursive Kate structures while doing a repetitive task like grinding grain or paddling. The physical rhythm helps entrain the complex mental rhythm. And intimate breath counting links the four evidentials to controlled breathing. You learn to mark seen versus heard through distinct breath patterns.
So the whole body is the instrument of learning and speaking?
Entirely.
But surely for complex societies, you need records. What about writing? This brings us to the glyphic threshold.
Right. KPTL does have a writing system, but it's conceived differently. It's called phonoglyphic concretion, PC. Writing doesn't replace speech. It folds or crystallizes it.
Folds speech.
Each written character, each glyph, is seen as a kind of fossilized vibration or resonant form. They derive their shapes from ableist geometry and Kate recursive patterns. The basic unit is the tricovenantal glyph, TCG.
Tricovenantal, implying it holds 3 layers of meaning, like the axis.
Exactly. Each TCG visually nests 3 components. 1, a core phonosymbol representing the sound concept. 2, a relaceme, a visual marker for the relational context, like Enga's SSDS. And 3, an evideme, marking the 4-style evidential source.
So every single written character declares its sound, its social connection, and its truth status.
That's the design. The meaning emerges from the interplay, the torsion, between these nested elements within the glyph structure.
And this leads to that incredible idea, morphethical reflexivity, MR. The idea that the writing system itself resists lies. How?
Because the glyph structure, derived from the symmetrical patterns of the ultra-axis, ableist geometry, inherently demands a kind of harmony. If you try to inscribe a known falsehood, say, using the direct visual evideme when you know it was reported, the required geometric form of the glyph becomes distorted.
The lines won't look right.
The claim is it produces architecturally visible asymmetry or disharmonic curvature. The physical act of writing the lie becomes awkward, unbalanced. The tool, the glyph form itself, pushes back against the deception. Ethics becomes an aesthetic principle.
That's mind-bending. And how do you read these glyphs?
The process is called lumiverging. It's not just passive decoding. The glyphs might be carved on dark, polished surfaces. Reading involves the play of light lumi on the glyph, converging with the reader's voice or internal resonance logos. It keeps literacy embodied, active, connected to light and sound, not just abstract symbols on a page.
Okay, one more piece. Technology. It sounds very grounded, ecological,
Yeah.
but it also incorporates AI. How does that fit without creating dependency?
Through what they call technanomorphic consonants, TC, the idea is that AI isn't a separate overlord system. AI nodes might be physically integrated into the community space, maybe embedded in walls or pillars, phonotectonic chambers.
And what do these AI nodes do?
They act as glyphic transluminators. They don't translate KPTL into, say, English. Instead, they listen to the KPTL chants or speech and resonate with the frequencies, projecting the corresponding TCG glyphs or perhaps related visual patterns onto surfaces in real time.
So the AI is like a visual accompanist in the choir.
Exactly. It becomes a participant in the covenantal performance, not the controller. It helps with learning, pronunciation, maybe visualizing complex recursive structures, reinforcing the group coherence. It merges the oral tradition with light-based tech, aiming for that covenantal intelligence without technological dependency. High IQ orality supported, not replaced by tech.
We've seen the how. Let's talk about the why. What are the big cognitive and ethical payoffs claimed for this delta T22 synthesis? What does it achieve that, say, English doesn't?
Well, the biggest ethical claim is achieving linguistic covenantal integrity, LCI. Because the 4 evidentials and Enga relational markers are baked into the grammar, dishonesty becomes structurally cumbersome.
It's just harder to lie convincingly.
Harder and less efficient. Sincerity, aligning your statement with your actual knowledge state and relational context, becomes the path of least resistance. Ethics emerges from syntax, not just from external rules or laws. The language itself demands self-awareness.
And the cognitive benefits, you mentioned acceleration.
Right, recurso-noetic acceleration, RNA. The system is designed to maximize distributed high IQ orality. Think about artisans carving those glyphs while chanting the claim is this practice enhances collective timing, coordination, and foresight. The Kate-derived recursive structures train the group mind in fractal anticipation.
Fractal anticipation, meaning they can model complex future scenarios more effectively.
That's the idea.
Okay.
Handling multiple variables and nested possibilities becomes more intuitive because the grammar itself is structured that way. It potentially allows faster, more elegant group problem solving.
So success isn't about individual brilliance, but group fluency.
Definitely. The key metric proposed is collective problem solving fluency, CPSF. How quickly, gracefully, and harmoniously can a diverse group tackle a complex issue using KPTL? That's the real test. The language is a tool for collective intelligence.
Okay, I need to push back slightly here. This sounds incredibly complex, almost utopian. Synthesizing 6 languages, co-design, glyphs, AI. Isn't there a huge risk this just becomes an intellectual artifact? Too complex to live, creating its own elite group of speakers, maybe even inadvertently erasing the original languages it draws from?
That's an absolutely crucial concern, and the sources seem very aware of it. That's why the non-replacive mandate is so strong. KPTL is intended as a specialized dialect of collaboration, not a replacement for everyday vernaculars. It's a tool for specific high-level cognitive tasks, particularly in transdisciplinary settings.
And the complexity.
The co-covenantal co-design process is meant to guard against purely academic complexity. The structure should only be as complex as needed for the cognitive function, and the TikTok Python layer is key here. It provides that accessible, performative base, keeping it grounded and usable within that low-tech ecological sovereignty framework. It's an attempt to prove indigenous grammatical structures can be platforms for future high-level cognition, resisting, rather than succumbing to, colonial linguistic simplification.
So the complexity in grammar is meant to lead to simplicity or clarity in ethics in action.
That's the core argument, that by engineering the language this way, you create a living system, what they call linguistic coagination, emerging through practice that inherently guides users towards integrity and relational awareness just by following its grammatical rules. Hashtag tag outro.
This has been a lot to take in. What we've explored today, this Kennemagorian synthesis, it really pushes linguistic anthropology towards something new. Onto linguistic engineering, and finding languages as living systems.
It's a vision of language that's deeply tribal in its roots, drawing from ancient wisdom, yet potentially global in its cognitive reach, sacred in its structure, ecological in its ethos.
The big takeaway seems to be that real cognitive power might lie not in huge vocabularies, but in sophisticated grammatical architecture. An architecture that demands we engage all parts of ourselves, the rational, the relational, the embodied, the spiritual, all at once.
And for someone learning or using KPTL, the ideal is developing the ability to fluidly pivot switch between these cognitive modes. Need deep planning, activate the Kate-style recursion, facing a conflict, lean into the Enga-derived relational grammar, assessing information, rely on the four evidential system, all within one coherent linguistic framework.
Flexible, powerful, multimodal thinking.
That's the promise. So this deep dive leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty profound question, I think.
Which is,
If language isn't just a neutral tool for describing the world, but is actually a kind of curriculum that shapes how we think, how we relate, even what we perceive as true, what hidden limitations might your own native language, the grammar you use every day, be placing on your ability to grasp truth, to connect deeply, to reflect effectively?
what cognitive corners are we maybe not seeing because our language doesn't have the tools to illuminate them?
Exactly. And what might it really feel like to think by weaving?